The promise was unequivocal. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party, in the December 7, 2024 election, will not abuse state resources by using state vehicles for his private campaign for president. He will use a campaign bus. Dr. Gideon Boaku, the spokesperson for Dr. Bawumia, told Joy News in an interview in June last year.
This is a private campaign of the vice president, and so he doesn't want to abuse the incumbency. So he decided that for this private political campaign, he's not going to use state resources. So he has his own set of vehicles. And what is important is that he could have, afforded to use V8s or whatever. But he thinks that in order to be frugal and also show that he's a leader that is prepared to, put to proper use the resources that he has.
However, a Corruption Watch investigation has uncovered evidence of the use of vehicles belonging to various state agencies in the campaign activities of Dr. Bawumia. When Corruption Watch contacted the Bawumia campaign through its Director of Communications, Dennis Miracles Abuaje, the campaign agreed that there may be some state vehicles involved in their campaign activities, but explained that the use of such state vehicles were not sanctioned by Vice President Dr. Bawumia.
There's nothing about abuse of incumbency. We are not there yet. Absolutely none. Everything about the state that has to do with Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia is enjoined on the state to do it. Even if he doesn't wish for it, he doesn't have a say. The state is mandated by law to do it for him. He may not want it, but he doesn't have a say. And let me tell you one thing. The use of the bus is not something that the security team were very happy about. They were not. But he was insistent on showing the way and leading the way in this aspect. Every other thing, even if he wishes not, he doesn't control it. Two things. He doesn't control the security system and the detail that is assigned to him. He doesn't, so he may not wish for it, but he doesn't control it. Secondly, he doesn't control the fact that I, Miracles, decide that I'm a DCE. He's passing to Kwewu and I decide to follow him. He doesn't control that. He doesn't control that. So these two things he has no control over them. But what he has control about is the fact that he has decided that he would run this campaign in a bus for two major reasons. Reduce the cost on the campaign, and two, increase our efficiency and effectiveness of this campaign. And we are really succeeding on that.
Corruption Watch sought to understand, among other things, how parties and candidates source vehicles they use for their campaigns, taking a cue from CDD Ghana's campaign financing study in 2022, which found that businesses and individuals provide funding for campaigns.
We are getting vehicles. Some are even giving their vehicles to us to use for their campaign. Some have also branded their vehicles and given to our constituencies to use for the campaign. Afterwards, they take them back. Some also have just left their vehicles and say use it for the campaign. So it comes in different forms. Remember, we have 276 constituencies across the country, all of them prosecuting the campaign for us at the constituency level, electoral and polling station. You have somebody at the polling station who has actually given his vehicle to the electoral area and say use this vehicle to move around and campaign. So they brand it. In fact, others have been branded for us. There are also individuals who have branded their own vehicles and are part of the campaign and campaigning. So it's not every vehicle you see on the streets that is branded MPP, that is actually owned by the campaign or the party. That's a matter of fact, and that's something that is a very important point. It's not every vehicle you see on the street that belongs to the party. Individuals have branded their vehicles and using it themselves to campaign for the party. Individuals have branded vehicles and given it to constituencies and regions and parliamentary candidates to use to run a campaign.
Our analysis shows that about 60%, or 6 out of every 10 vehicles used by the Bawumia campaign, belongs to the state. In addition, 20%, or every 2 out of the 10 vehicles in Bawumia's campaign, belong to businesses, some of which have benefited from single-sourced multi-million cedi contracts given under the Nana Addo Bawumia administration. The other 20%, or 2 out of 10 vehicles in the campaign, belong to prominent individuals. Some of the state vehicles involved were from the Office of the President: a Nissan Patrol, Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture; a Toyota Land Cruiser, Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development; a Nissan Patrol, Ministry of Special Development Initiatives; a Toyota Land Cruiser, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, a Nissan pickup; and the Ministry of Education, an Isuzu pickup. Others are Ghana Water Company Limited, a Toyota Land Cruiser; National Health Insurance Authority, a Toyota Land Cruiser; Ghana Library Board, a Toyota Land Cruiser; Asokwa Municipal Assembly, a Toyota high roof van; Nkaria Senior High Technical School, a Toyota Hilux pickup; and Nursing Training School Kumasi, a Mitsubishi pickup. Some vehicles belonging to public secondary schools were also involved in campaign activities in spite of a Ghana Education Service practice against the involvement of public second cycle institutions and its resources for political activities. Corruption Watch captured several school buses involved in the Bawumia campaign. The schools whose buses were captured are Nkoko Senior High School, Bipong Senior High School, Mpraiso Senior High School, Nkwetia Presby Senior High School, Nkwasco, Kwehu Ridge Senior High School, Salvation Army Senior High School in Achim Wenchi. Mr. Charles Yao Aheto Chega, former Director General of the Ghana Education Service, has described the use of buses of public senior high schools as an infiltration of political influence in Ghana's education system.
The practice as it has been with the GES of public campaign activities is that the schools are not venues for political campaign. That is the first principle. And it is based on the fact that a majority of the children who are in the schools are below the voting age. So they are not an area or a group to actually be campaigned to, because they are largely not voters. In earlier times, it was even probably stricter in terms of the fact that you couldn't even go for the buses. So secondary schools were cut out of the whole voting system. Their facilities were cut out of the whole voting system and were literally reserved for the purposes of education.
So at what point would you say this practice changed to now allowing politicians access to your buses?
It has grown incrementally, especially when the politicians started providing the buses for the schools. I say the politicians because, again, it was couched to look like, the political individual within the space where the school is influential in causing the school to come, the bus to come to the school, so when they need it, they can come in. And it has continued. I mean, we won't limit it only to this current regime, but it has become more intense in this current regime. But in the previous regime, under the NDC, it was happening.
Also involved were some senior high school students. On Friday, 11th October 2024, some students of the Jakobu Senior High Technical School were bused to Second Lady Samira Bawumia's engagement with identifiable groups at Jakobu in the Odotobri constituency of the Asante region. Mr. Tega described the practice of taking school children out of their schools to political campaign grounds as an abomination.
That is probably an abomination because it is not allowed. Because, I mean, if you can't come there to campaign to them, why do you want to take them out? No, I mean, when you follow the principle, if you can't come in to campaign, why do you want to carry them out? Because they are not people who are going to vote anyway. So why do you want to carry them out? So that is why I think it's an abomination, because it is not expected that should even happen.
Mr. Tsega called for the enactment of a law to protect the schools and their heads from political control.
It is time to really regulate that system and make, define clauses that ensure that, these things become bounded in law and therefore can become a strong point of departure for the headmaster to refuse politicians in terms of the way they act.
There were also businesses that supported the campaign. Prominent among them were J.A. Plant Pool Ghana Limited, member of the Jospong Group of Companies, Rona Motors Ghana Limited, and Birchfield Ghana Limited, a subsidiary of the KGL Group. J.A. Plant Pool Ghana Limited has been awarded a $178.7 million contract for the District Road Improvement Project, DRIP, through the single-sourced procurement method. Similarly, Rona Motors Ghana Limited was awarded a single-sourced contract for the supply of a Land Cruiser at 1,195,000 Ghana cedis for the Controller and Accountant General's Department on the 19th of September 2022. The company was also awarded about 7.7 million Ghana cedis contract by the Ministry of Finance to procure 5 SUVs and 1 cross-country 4x4 vehicle on September 19, 2024. The KGL Group, which is the parent company of Birchfield Ghana Limited, was awarded a 55 million Ghana cedis digitalization contract by the National Lottery Authority in February 2022. Among the prominent individuals whose vehicles were found in the pool are Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, the NPP vice presidential candidate, Brian Achampong, Minister of Food and Agriculture and MP for Abetifi constituency, Samuel Erickson Abaka, Member of Parliament for Shama, Anthony Abaifa Kabo, a former Deputy Minister for Roads and Highways and senior aide to Dr. Bawumia, and Dr. Henry Kwabena Kokofu, former Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Although the vice presidential candidate of the NPP is currently not entitled to military security as an MP, he was provided with heavy military security in addition to police security during his campaign tour in the Akwatia constituency in the eastern region. Miracles Abwaji, who is also a presidential staffer under the Akufo-Addo administration, defended the provision of military protection for NPP vice presidential candidate Matthew Opoku Prempeh.
What is your vice presidential candidate entitled to? You have justified.
He's a member of parliament. He's entitled to security.
One policeman.
Yes.
So,
but he can apply. He can apply. He can apply.
So we have video of him with military.
He can apply. There are private. He can apply. There are private individuals in this country that are allowed to apply. They apply and they get military escort. They get police escort. Once you have applied, gone through the due process, you haven't flouted any law.
So as far as you are concerned, do you know for sure that he applied for military
anything escort? That you are not, he is not due, which he believes he needs more of it, he has applied for a fact, and it's been given to him.
You can provide proof.
I don't have to provide any proof for that.
Corruption Watch understands that the police provide security to all presidential candidates and their vice presidential candidates. Corruption Watch also wrote letters to the public second cycle schools requesting clarification about the use of the school vehicles for Dr. Bawumia's campaign, but none of the schools has returned Corruption Watch's request for comments. In the period that Corruption Watch monitored the activities of the Bawumia campaign from September 4 to November 4, 2024, we found that a total of 136 vehicles were used in campaign activities across 4 regions. 76 of the vehicles, making up 56%, belong to the state. 32 of the vehicles making up 23.5%, belong to businesses, while the remaining 28, which is 20.5%, belong to individuals. Notably, the 136 vehicles exclude identifiable police vehicles, that is, vehicles using GP number plates or visibly embossed with the word police, some national security vehicles, and vehicles for hire such as Ayalolo and Metro Mass Transit Limited buses, registered to the Ministry of Transport, and an STC vehicle registered to the Agricultural Development Bank. Corruption Watch's evidence shows the use of those vehicles by the Bawumia campaign in Wassa Manso, Wassa East Constituency, Western Region, Odotobri, Bekwai, Aswase, Subin, and Ejura Sechiredumase constituencies in the Asante region, Upper Manya, Nkoko, and Akwatia constituencies in the Eastern region, and La Dade Kotopong and Kung Katamanso constituencies in the Greater Accra region. The vehicles were captured during campaign activities of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the NPP presidential candidate, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, the NPP vice presidential candidate, and Mrs. Samira Bawumia, the second lady and wife of Dr. Bawumia. Anti-corruption campaigner and director of policy engagement and partnerships at CDD Ghana, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, explains the concept of abuse of incumbency.
Abuse of incumbency is basically referring to an incumbent or a person who is in an official position in the state using their official position and the resources that they are entrusted with, for personal gain, mostly during elections. And so when we refer to incumbents, often people think about a presidential candidate, but also we are talking about a parliamentary candidate. So if you are an MP and you are even in opposition, right, you are still, if you're a sitting MP, you are still an incumbent, and you can use that position and the resources that come with it to abuse power unfairly.
Commissioner of the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, SHRAJ, Mr. Joseph Whittal, explains abuse of incumbency within the context of Chapter 24 of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, which contains the Code of Conduct for Public Officers.
Under the Constitution, Article 284, no public officer shall put himself in a situation where his public duty conflicts or is likely to conflict with his personal interest. All right? So if you take incumbency abuse from the angle of the Code of Conduct in the Constitution, it means that any time a public official, from the presidency to ministers of to members of parliament, all the elected persons who are seeking political office or public office, whatever they do that will allow their public duty to be influenced by their personal interest, that within the context of charge is incumbency abuse. Incumbency is taking unfair advantage of the fact that you are a public officer and you are taking advantage of resources that are meant for development generally and passing it off as if you are giving the people or the people of that area, you are making this possible for them because it is at your command. And it's not. It's for the people. It has been determined that that is the project that will benefit the people. That is part of the incumbency advantages.
Since a political party is a private organization, when a member of any political party occupies a public office such as president, vice president, minister of state, or member of parliament, that person becomes a public officer and must act or serve in the overriding public interest and not private interest. Another incident Corruption Watch discovered was the involvement of some state vehicles, including the Asokwa Municipal Assembly's Toyota Hiace high roof van, in the convoy of Second Lady Samira Bawumia, who the Supreme Court has ruled not to be an Article 71 public officer. However, Miracle Zabwaje contests that the Second Lady is entitled to state protection, hence the involvement of the state vehicles in her campaign trail.
The Second Lady of the Republic of Ghana is protected by the state. And that's a fact. Okay. And I don't know what you are referring to as not being a public officer. It was related to payment of remuneration. Mm-hmm. That was what we were related to. Yes. But the Second Lady, not just the Second Lady, the same security system of the state provide extensive security for the first, second gentleman of the land and other members of their family. It includes the Second Lady. Mm-hmm. So when you see a state vehicle in the convoy of the Second Lady, it is permitted under law because he's being protected by the security.
The Shraj boss suggests that the involvement of state vehicles in the fleet of Mrs. Bawumia is even more inappropriate because the Supreme Court of Ghana has ruled clearly that First and Second Ladies are not public officers.
Even with the clear decision by the Supreme Court, if in the past we didn't know whether they were public officers or not, now with the decision in Abronye and the First and Second Ladies, they are no longer public officers, but they are still moving around with convoys. Who pays for that? The state.
The Corruption Watch investigation was conducted as a scoping investigation to uncover potential incidents of abuse of state resources or abuse of incumbency during the 2024 election campaign by the incumbent vice president and presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. The investigation was premised on available research and anecdotal evidence that abuse of incumbency continues to be a recurring problem in Ghana's electoral democracy, as well as the lack of legislation that clearly prohibits abuse of state resources for electoral advantage, except for conflict of interest prohibitions in the 1992 Constitution. It has been the trend that opposition parties always complain about abuse of state resources by incumbents, particularly incumbent presidential candidates. The abuse of incumbency occurs in many forms and includes, but is not limited to, an incumbent's use of financial, enforcement of regulations and institutional resources of the state, which are not typically available for use by opposition candidates. Dr. Kojo Asante highlights the advocacy efforts of CSOs to get duty bearers to rethink the existing state of affairs.
I have to say that for me, when I look at where we've come from, at least the public has become more aware of the incidents of abuse of public resources during elections, because it even used to be an issue. You know, that during elections, everybody talks about that, we feel that somebody's abusing. And in the past, when we have even released reports, it sort of constrained public behavior. Otherwise, you can just imagine every state activity during election will just be turned into, but because the public would, would say something about it, and people are okay, don't, they will say don't bring party flags and, to some events. It doesn't stop people from still trying, but at least there's some awareness of this type of behavior.
For his part, Shraj boss Wital outlines that the Commission has monitored multiple elections for abuse of incumbency over the past 2 decades.
We've monitored the past 4 elections, and each of them issues of incumbency abuse has taken place. We have public officers who otherwise are public servants at the level where their party is going for primaries, not resigning, but using vehicles, using staff of the ministry or the department or the agency to go to the ground to influence people to vote for him. the time of that public officials in terms of the staff, your own use of fuel and the vehicle, and everything that should have been done for the organization, which has now been turned into your constituency project, is an abuse of incumbency.
Clearly, abuse of incumbency or abuse of state resources for electoral advantage has been a recurring problem since 1992, and politicians are not likely to stop abusing state resources of their own volition or abide by a promise to stop, as has been the case with the Bawumia campaign, unless corrective action is taken that may include prosecution and penal sanctions. On how to address abuse of incumbency or abuse of state resources in Ghana, Dr. Asante called for the need for incumbent candidates to separate their official role from their political party ambition, like it happens in countries like Nigeria and the United States.
This is an issue that has to happen. You see in the manifestos that there is a commitment to, at least the NDC manifesto, I see a commitment to campaign financing. The MPP is looking at other kinds of, values around politics and all of those things. If there's that general commitment, then I think the time is now ready, definitely after this election, for us to have a serious legislation, comprehensive legislation for campaign financing. And it's not just the campaign, but party financing, because you have to address both the internal party financing issues and national, because the two are connected, and then you can address the governance side, so that the whole pipeline, there is clear incentives as to what kind of rules that we should all play by to make the competition fair and elections legitimate and trusted.
According to him, the regulation will come with specified campaign timelines and guidelines, a breach of which should attract sanctions like disqualification and prosecution.
What needs to happen is that the legislation has to be clearer, and really that's where some of us are pushing for campaign financing and party financing reform agenda, because that's where I believe you also capture the issue of abuse of incumbency. The prohibitions, the caps. What if a president is in office and is going to stand for election? What are the do's and don'ts? What are the things that they have to pay for? Setting up a campaign period so you can track. All of those things will have to come through campaign financing reform, and then it's clearer for law enforcement, is clearer for citizens to say this person has offended. And some of the sanctions should come with disqualifying you from participating.
Shraj Boss Whittal wraps it all up with a request for strong leadership from the president and the judiciary.
We need a visionary, a strong leader who can really commit himself and say, I have come to do this regardless, even if I'm voted out, I have done my part, and strengthen the legal framework. We need very committed judges who will not use technicalities to get people out before them out, instead of jailing them. We need such commitment. Examples will send a signal to people. Until then, we'll have a problem.